Sign here, Mr. Dolan. 90 days. Then you take your daughter and go back to whatever it is you do." She didn't look up when she said it. She was signing something else at the same time, like our conversation was just one more item on a list. The contract was 8 pages long. I read every word of it in the parking garage afterward, sitting in my truck with the engine running because the heater was broken, and it was February in Chicago. Page 6 was the part that mattered. It said I would live in her home, present myself as her husband at 2 specific events, a board dinner and a family gathering in March, and in exchange, she would pay off the remaining $41,000 on my business loan. No physical contact beyond what was socially necessary. No discussion of the arrangement with third parties. Termination upon completion of the 90-day period. No exceptions. I almost didn't sign it. I want to be honest about that, because I think people assume the money made it easy. It didn't. I sat in that parking garage for 20 minutes thinking about what my father would say if he knew. He was a union pipe fitter for 31 years. He had opinions about dignity. But then I thought about Mackie. She was 7. She had her mother's eyes and my stubbornness and a laugh that could reorganize a whole room, and she'd been wearing the same pair of sneakers since October. Because I'd made a bad call on a commercial contract in the fall, and we were still climbing out of it. $41,000 was the difference between keeping my moving company and watching 8 years of work get absorbed by a bank. So I signed it. Her name was Simone Voss. She was 43 years old, the founder and CEO of a logistics software company that apparently did something important with supply chain management. I didn't fully understand what the company did. I still don't, if I'm honest. What I understood was that she had a penthouse on the 47th floor of a building in River North, a personal assistant named Theodore who communicated exclusively through calendar invites, and a reason for needing a fake husband that she never explained to me, and that I knew better than to ask about. We moved in on a Tuesday. Maki thought we were house-sitting. I told her it was a long job, that sometimes work took you to unusual places. She accepted this because she was 7, and also because the apartment had a view of the lake that made her stand at the window, with her hands pressed flat against the glass for 5 full minutes, without saying a word, which was a record. Simone was in a meeting when we arrived. Theodore showed us to our rooms. Separate rooms. Mine was the guest suite near the kitchen. Mackie's was a room at the end of the hall that had been a home office 48 hours earlier, based on the faint rectangular impressions in the carpet where a desk had been. Someone had put a small lamp in there with a yellow shade. I don't know who arranged that. I never asked. I made Mackie's bed with the sheets we'd brought from home because she didn't like unfamiliar sheets. Then I sat on the edge of the guest bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about what I'd gotten us into. Simone came home at 8:15 that night. Mackie was already asleep. I was at the kitchen table eating cereal because I hadn't wanted to go through someone else's refrigerator, and she walked in and stopped when she saw me, like she'd forgotten we'd be there. "You're still up," she said. "I'm a night person," I said. She looked at the cereal box. "There's actual food in the refrigerator." "I know. I didn't want to assume." She set her bag down on the counter and opened the refrigerator and stood there for a while, not moving. Then she took out a container of leftover something and put it in the microwave and leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, waiting. The microwave hummed. The city spread out 47 floors below us, and she was looking at it without seeing it. "The board dinner is March 14th, she said. "I'll have Theodore send you the details." "Okay, I'll need you to wear something appropriate. There's an account set up." "I have a suit. It's a formal dinner, Mr. Dolan. I have a formal suit." She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked back at the city. "Fine." That was most of our conversation for the first 3 weeks. She left before Mackie woke up. She came home after Mackie was asleep. On weekends, she worked from her home office with the door closed. We moved around each other like people on a shared hiking trail, each making room, neither acknowledging the effort. Mackie noticed she was quiet. Kids do. "Does she not like us?" she asked me one morning while I was making her lunch. "She's just busy," I said. "She looks at the lake a lot. A lot of people do. Like she's waiting for something." I didn't have an answer for that. I cut her sandwich into triangles the way she liked them and changed the subject. The thing about Simone that nobody would have guessed from looking at her. From the way she moved through a room like she'd calculated the most efficient route beforehand. From the way she spoke to Theodore in that quiet, exact tone that left no room for misinterpretation, was that she kept a photograph on her nightstand. I only saw it once, by accident, when she'd left her bedroom door open and I was passing in the hallway. A framed photo, small, maybe 4 by 6, propped against the lamp. A man and a woman somewhere outdoors. Mountains behind them. She was laughing. Not performing laughing. Actually laughing, with her whole face, in a way I'd never seen her face do in the 3 weeks I'd been living in her apartment. I kept walking. The board dinner was on a Thursday. I wore the suit. She wore something dark blue that probably cost more than my truck, and she stood at the mirror in the hallway doing something to her earring, and I thought, for a half second, that I should say she looked nice. Then I thought about page 6 of the contract, and I didn't say anything. Theodore had arranged for Mackie to stay with a woman named Gloria from the building's concierge service. Mackie was suspicious of Gloria until Gloria produced a deck of Uno cards, at which point Mackie's loyalty transferred completely. The dinner was in a private room at a restaurant in the West Loop, 12 people at a long table. I shook hands and said the right things and ate food I couldn't identify and watched Simone move through the room. She was different here. Not warmer exactly, but more vivid. She knew what every person at that table needed from her. Reassurance, deference, challenge, respect, and she gave each of them precisely that, like a musician adjusting pitch in real time. It was remarkable to watch. Halfway through dinner, the man to my left, a board member, older, silver hair, the kind of face that's been comfortable for a long time, leaned toward me and said, "She never brings anyone to these things." "Is that right?" I said. 14 years I've been on this board, first time. He said it like a question that wasn't a question. I said, "She's a private person." He nodded slowly. "She is. Protective of herself." He picked up his wine glass. "Can't blame her after everything." I didn't ask what he meant. On the way home in the car, Simone sat very straight and looked out the window, and I sat on my side and looked out my window, and we didn't speak until she said, "Thank you," very quietly just before we got out, and I said, "Sure," and that was that. March became April. The family gathering, her parents, it turned out, and a younger brother named something I never quite caught, was upstate, a weekend at a house on a lake near Galena. We drove up. On a Friday afternoon, Mackie in the back seat with her headphones on, the flat Illinois farmland spreading out around us, and Simone sat in the passenger seat with a folder of documents on her lap that she was reviewing for the entire 3-hour drive. Somewhere around Rockford, she said, without looking up, "My mother will try to feed your daughter too much. Let her." "Okay," I said. "My father will ask you questions about the business. He doesn't mean anything by it. He asks everyone." "I don't mind." She turned a page. "My brother thinks this is a bad idea." I glanced over. "Which part?" "All of it." She didn't elaborate. The house was older, on a quiet stretch of the lake, with a long wooden dock and a yard that needed some attention, and a kitchen that smelled like something had been in the oven for hours. Her mother, Miriam, had Simone's bone structure and none of Simone's reserve, and she hugged me before she'd finished saying my name and then crouched down to Mackie's level and said, "I have been waiting all morning for someone to help me finish decorating these cookies," and Mackie went with her into the kitchen like she'd known her for years. Her father, Ben, showed me the dock, pointed out a section of railing that needed replacing, asked about my truck, asked about Chicago, asked carefully how Simone was doing in a way that made it clear he was asking something more specific, something he wasn't going to phrase directly. "She works hard," I said. He nodded, looked at the water. "She worked hard before, too, but it was different." He was quiet for a moment. "She used to call more." I didn't say anything. 4 years is a long time," he said. Then he changed the subject to the railing. Her brother Drew shook my hand on the porch that evening like he was testing a ladder before trusting his weight to it. He was 38, I guessed, and he had Simone's eyes, sharper in him, and the particular wariness of someone who has watched someone they love get hurt and is still watching. "How'd you two meet?" he asked. "Work," I said. She doesn't usually mix work and Drew. Simone's voice from behind the screen door, flat, not loud. He stopped. That night after dinner, after Mackie had fallen asleep in a room upstairs with a quilt that probably went back 2 generations, I sat on the dock alone. The lake was quiet and black, and the dock creaked when the water moved. and above me the sky was doing things that the sky over Chicago couldn't manage, being full of stars and uninterrupted. The screen door opened behind me, and Simone came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat at the far end of the dock and held one out toward me, and I took it. We sat there without talking. The water moved. A light went out in the house. "He was a pilot," she said eventually. I waited. "My husband." She was looking at the water. "Commercial. We were married for 9 years. He died 4 years ago. A heart thing. He was 41 years old and he had a heart thing nobody knew about, and he came home from a trip, and by the morning he was gone." She said it the way you say something you've said many times, that has worn smooth from repetition. "The board has been asking me to show more stability. Show that I'm not." She made a small gesture. "That I have a life outside the company. That I'm not going to make decisions from a place of another pause. I needed someone who would do this without complications. Without catching feelings," I said. She looked at me. I wasn't going to say it that way. "But that's what you mean." She looked back at the water. "Yes." I drank the coffee. It was good coffee. "How long ago did you put the ad up?" "It wasn't an ad." "How'd you find me then?" "Theodore found you. He researched options. You came up because of a review. A woman you'd helped move after a divorce. She wrote that you were the first man she'd met in 2 years who treated her like a person rather than a problem to manage." She paused. Theodore thought that was relevant. I didn't know what to say to that. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think he was right." We sat there a while longer. An owl somewhere. The water. She went in first and I sat there after, looking at the stars until the cold got serious. The drive home on Sunday was different. Not dramatically. Mackie sat in the back seat narrating a complicated story she'd invented about 2 frogs. And Simone had the folder again, but she closed it somewhere around Dixon and just watched the road. When we hit the outskirts of the city, she said, "Your daughter is remarkable." "I know," I said. "She's very comfortable with herself. She gets that from her mother, is her mother. She passed when Mackie was 2. Cancer." Simone was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." We drove the rest of the way in without speaking, but it was a different kind of without speaking. The family gathering clause on page 6 was fulfilled. We were somewhere in the mid-50s of our 90 days. Things shifted slowly, the way temperatures shift, where you don't notice it until you're wearing a different coat. She started leaving before I was up, but there would be coffee made. I started making dinner a couple nights a week because I cooked, and it seemed wasteful not to. She started eating at the kitchen table instead of her office. Mackie started telling her things. About school, about a girl named Brittany who was going through a phase, about a book she was reading, about whether it was possible for a frog to live in an apartment. Simone listened with complete attention, the same way she listened to board members, like what Mackie was saying was the most important item on the agenda. One night I was watching Mackie at the kitchen table doing homework, and Simone came in and sat across from her without saying anything, and opened her laptop. And they just sat there together, working, and the lamp was on, and the city was out the window, and nobody said anything for 45 minutes, and it was the most peaceful I'd felt since before my wife got sick. The thing that undid me, I'll tell you exactly what it was. Mackie had brought a stuffed animal from home. A rabbit, brown, one eye replaced with a button that Reginald had fallen off when she was 3. Its name was Paul. Don't ask me why. It was Paul. One evening I found Paul on the kitchen counter with a small, careful tag tied to his ear. Paper, folded, the size of a business card. In Simone's handwriting, "For Paul, who holds things together." 3 words. I stood there holding that piece of paper, and I thought about a woman who ran a company that employed 400 people, who hadn't laughed with her whole face in 4 years, who got up at 5 in the morning and worked until 10 at night, and came home to an apartment that was technically full of people, but had been empty for a very long time. I thought about what it costs to let yourself make a small gesture. I thought about how you don't do something like that. Write a note to a one-eyed stuffed rabbit, without meaning it. I put the note in my jacket pocket, and I didn't say anything to her about it. The 90 days ended on a Tuesday. I'd been quietly packing for a week, moving things back into boxes the way you move things back into boxes, which is slowly, which is never quite believing you're actually doing it. Mackie didn't know. I hadn't figured out how to tell her. I kept starting and stopping. On Monday night, the last night, I was in the kitchen after 11 and Simone came out of her office and she looked at the boxes by the door and she stopped. Tomorrow, I said. She looked at the boxes for a while. Then she looked at me. Massey thinks she's going to see Miriam again in June, she said. My mother invited her. She mentioned that she's been talking about the lake house. Since we got back, she loves water. I know. Simone's hands were at her sides. Very still. I could refund the loan amount. I waited, or I could. She stopped. Started again. I have the second quarter board meetings in April and May, 2 evenings. If you, Simone, I said. She stopped. If you want me to stay, I said, you can just say that. She looked at me for a long time, the city behind her. The lamp on. Mackie's drawings from school stuck to the refrigerator with magnets because she'd asked to put them there and I hadn't thought to say no and Simone hadn't said anything about it, had just stepped around them every morning when she made coffee. Stay, she said. Quiet. Like the word cost something. Okay, I said. In May, Mackie asked if she could call Simone something other than Simone, because she said Simone was a lot of name for every day. Simone said that was a fair point. Mackie thought about it for 3 days. She came back with Moni. She said it was shorter and also sounded like someone who would drink coffee in the morning and know where things were. Simone said that was the best thing anyone had said to her in years. There is a photograph on my refrigerator now. Not the lake one, a different one. A Saturday in June, dock at Galena. Mackie standing at the end of the dock with her arms out for balance. Simone beside her with one hand loosely at Mackie's back in case she needed it, both of them looking at something in the water. You can't see their faces. You don't need to. My father did ask, eventually, what happened. I tried to explain the contract thing and he was quiet for a long time and then he said, so she hired you and you showed up decent and she wasn't expecting that. Something like that, I said. He made a sound. Son, that's just a love story. Maybe it is. I don't have a cleaner way to say it than this. I came in with boxes and a kid and a debt and a suit I'd bought for my wife's cousin's wedding 8 years ago. I wasn't trying to be anything. I was just trying to not be less than I am. Turns out that was the whole thing she was looking for.